Welcome back to the Beonby Show. This is episode 6, and we'd like to welcome Dan back to the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Good.
Good to be here.
Yeah, I'm also doing great. So today's New Year's Eve, so we decided why not do a podcast? Just because. And before we start, I'd quickly like to mention, if you would like to listen to our last episode that we did together, The Relativity of Wrong, please note that the interesting stuff begins at the timestamp 10 minutes and 35 seconds. So I just wanted to make that noted before we start this one, just to clear up any confusion. So.
Great. Yeah, so last night we were watching The Dark Knight.
It was the movie with Batman.
Yeah, it was the Batman movie. It's a really famous movie. But, what did you think of the movie, first of all?
It was really good. I really liked it.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty entertaining.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just thought it was a pretty interesting movie, so I thought I'd bring up some potential questions that we could discuss.
Mm-hmm.
So one of them is that it seems like Batman is kind of he operates outside of the legal system. He's not... Technically, what he's doing is illegal, right? He's doing, like, vigilante justice. Vigilante means, like, you're not... You know what that means? It means you're not, like, a cop or something.
You're not, like,
technically,
allowed to do it.
He's a criminal, right? He's not allowed to be just running around, like, beating people up.
But yet they still let him do it.
Well, I don't think they can stop him in the movie, right? They don't stop him.
They kind of just go along with it.
Yeah. So one question is, do you think what he's doing is justified, even though it's operating outside of this legal system?
I feel like there's some justification to it, because even though he's technically not doing stuff that's illegal,
mm-hmm.
I feel like because he's done so much good and he's saved the city, like, lots of times, then I feel like there's some justification to it. Although, like, then if word got around about that, then people would just start trying to be, they would try and be like replicas of Batman, and they would just try and do the same things that he's doing just so they could, escape the law and still get recognized by the police for doing good things, and they would probably fail. So
right.
I think there's both the good and bad sides to it, but overall I think there is a little bit of justification
mm-hmm.
for.
Yeah, actually, we should mention,
actions.
I guess, that, like, spoiler warning. What do people say?
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, so if you haven't seen this movie, skip ahead to whatever we talk about next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you should just watch the movie because it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are you saying? You're saying it's
there is some justification.
There is some justification, but where do you draw the line, right? Because there has to be some rule of law, presumably, you think, right? Like,
yeah, but I feel like
there have to be some things that are legal, and there have to be some things that are not legal, and you have to enforce that, right?
But Batman is such a strange situation that you can't really make just a law saying no Batman,
mm-hmm.
because
what he's doing is outside of the law.
Yeah, but he's kind of like the backup police.
Right. So what do you think they should do? Because if you say, like, we're going to tolerate it, then, like you're saying, I think this is what you're saying.
Yeah. There's
going to be copycats, and there's people who are going to feel as if, well, if there's some exceptions to the rule being made, maybe I can be one of those exceptions to the rule. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So where do you draw the line? How do you handle that?
That's a pretty good question. I don't know. It's pretty complicated because, like the old saying, no matter what you do, not everyone's gonna like it. So even if they just completely outlawed him, there'd obviously be benefits and drawbacks. Obviously, he wouldn't be doing illegal stuff anymore, and people would know that he's not doing illegal stuff anymore. But also there'd also be no Batman, so there wouldn't be any backup police or like people or him to help the police when they need it, which is clearly a lot. But if they just let him keep going, then what I said earlier is true.
Right. What if they enforce the law, right? So the laws are as they stand, and you can't just be going out in the middle of the night and beating people up and whatever. You can't do that, and they enforce that, so they go after people who do that. But in Batman's case, they feel like what he's doing is beneficial, but it would be tricky, right? Because, for example, cops can't really do what he does.
Yeah.
In a lot of situations, he does stuff that's like kind of fishy.
Yeah.
Like that moment when he was in the jail cell with the Joker, right? And he just starts beating him up. Like, a cop cannot do that, right? That's crazy.
That's not allowed.
Yeah,
and
so
he even blocked the door with the chair so that the commissioner wouldn't be able to get in.
Right. Okay. One other question I have, it's not even specific to Batman, but just an interesting question generally. Have you ever heard of this? The ends justify the means. Do you know what that means?
I do not. I have not heard that before.
Okay. So basically, what do you know what it what do you think it would mean? The ends justify the means. So like, let's say, well, even in Batman's case, let's say in the jail cell situation where he's with the Joker and he beats them up, and maybe he thinks that's like not great, but it served a greater purpose. Like, he was able to get information out of him, let's say, even though in that situation he didn't really get information out of him. The Joker was just going to tell him at some point anyway, it seemed like, right? Yeah. But in that case, you would say the ends are like the goal, and the means are like the way you get to the goal. So if you say the end justify the means, it means that...
what the outcome will justify the way you get to it.
Right. So if the outcome is like super important and super valuable, super good, whatever way you get there justifies it. Even if if the way you get there might not be great. Like, maybe you have to...
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like, you have to break some eggs to make an omelet. Is another way to say that. So do you think... Are there some situations where that applies? Are there other situations where that doesn't apply? Do you think in all situations the ends justify the means, or no?
No, I don't. Because, you never know if the outcome is actually going to happen. Like, for example, with when the Joker was let's go back to the jail cell, like when Batman was beating him up, like obviously the goal was to get information out of him. So if he ended up doing that, then you could say the ends justify the means. But since that didn't happen, for that scene, then you can't say that.
Mm-hmm. But that would be, you only know that in hindsight. Like, you only know... Yeah, I guess what you're saying is that there's always... the outcome is in the future, and so there's uncertainty in regards to the outcome. You don't know what exactly it specifically will be. In that case, in the jail cell, you wouldn't know how good the outcome was until after that happened, right? You don't know if he's going to tell you some information or not.
Yeah. Because, if you say the ends justify the means, but then everything just fails and crashes down, then, looking back in hindsight, in that situation where it applies to you, then everything is just, it just defeats the purpose. And it doesn't really...
Wait, so what are you saying? Are you saying that the ends do not justify the means?
No, in some cases they do.
Okay, because, like in what situation?
Yeah, and for example, if you... Let's go back to that other example you gave, breaking eggs to make an omelet. If you break eggs, make the omelet, and you sit down and eat it, and it's awesome... Okay, right.
But that's just a phrase, right? That's a silly thing, obviously.
Yeah, but...
No one's getting hurt.
In some situations, it's obviously more... it has more meaning than in other situations.
Okay, let me give you a situation from my own life, right? So, I work in an office building in downtown San Francisco, and outside of my office building, pretty frequently on the street corners, there's a organization that is asking people for donations to a charity that I believe works to save some endangered species in the world, and is more generally like a wildlife preserve type of organization, right? Donation based, so they need money to help.
So their business model is donations.
Yeah, they're a charity. They're a charity. It's not a business. Yeah. And so, but the way that they ask for money on the street is super obnoxious. So, people will be walking past them on the street, and they're almost harassing you. So they're super extroverted, and they're kind of in your face. They're like, hey, how's it going? Hey, they're trying to shake your hand, even if they'll see you're on a phone call or something. Let's say they're still trying to shake your hand and talk to you, and get you into a conversation. They're almost aggressively friendly. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they're trying to get you into a conversation, and the outcome of that conversation is that they're gonna like try to get you to to donate money, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so do you think in that situation, and first of all, it's super effective because basically they guilt people into it. Like they walk up to you, they're super warm and friendly, aggressively so. They start trying to shake your hand, they get you involved in a conversation. People then they're like, "Oh, can you donate money?" And people are like, "Oh, yeah, I would donate money." Because if they weren't so aggressive, and they were standing on the corner quietly with just a sign, "Hey, can you donate to this cause?" I think they would get a lot less donations.
Mm-hmm.
So by using these tactics, they're raising a lot more money. So do you think that in that case, do the ends justify the means?
I think mostly, like, because you mentioned that the way they get them is really obnoxious. Like, for example, if they see someone on a phone call, they said they'd still try and shake your hand and do whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they shouldn't be like necessarily harassing people, but they should definitely be drawing attention to themselves. Because I know, like, I've seen a lot of this, like, even in, I don't know, places like Chicago. Like, you go and there's, like, people standing there and they want you to, donate to something. And they're, like, just standing there.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, they have so many things to do and they have places to go. So the people that have these things to do, they're always going to walk right past them. And because Chicago's such a busy place, there's not going to be a lot of people that are going to stop and take interest to it.
Right.
And I'm guessing San Francisco is another one of those places.
Sure.
So if people are like loudly drawing attention to themselves, then in that case the ends justify the means. But if they're like harassing people, then that doesn't work, because then they're actually harassing them, and that's not good.
Right.
So I feel like if they were like just a bit more considered with their starting approach to try and talk to people, but they still did like what they were doing, like for example, not like harassing people like on phone calls or doing something clearly that means I don't want to talk to them, then they would definitely have a better outcome.
Right. I think I agree with you. Yeah, I think right. Your goal is to raise as much money as you can,
and it's for a good cause, and you don't want to come off as bad
for what you think is a good cause.
Yeah, and you don't want to come off as bad based on your first impression by like yelling at you when you're on a phone call.
Sure. And it's important to draw attention to yourself, right? But as soon as you start violating another person's personal space or interrupting phone calls, like now you aren't just drawing attention to yourself, you're drawing attention to yourself negatively, and like making another person's experience much worse.
Yeah.
So that doesn't seem to be justified.
Yeah, that's why they shouldn't do that.
One thing one group I have a lot of respect for, I think they're the Jehovah's Witnesses. Maybe I'm mistaken. They're basically a religious group.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know if you see them a lot around Chicago, but in San Francisco you see them everywhere. Basically, they always are standing in pairs. It's two people, and they have a bunch of little pamphlets with them, basically selling you on their religion.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just quietly standing alongside the street. And if you can go walk up and talk to them, and they'll explain to you what their beliefs are, and they might try to encourage you to take on their faith. But they will not be in your face. They're not aggressive. They're not going out there like this charity is. It's very different. They're very quiet. And so to me, like, I have a lot of respect for those guys because they believe in something and they're standing up for their beliefs and they're out there, in their mind trying to help other people, but they're not being obnoxious and mean when doing it. Maybe they could be more successful if they were a little bit louder and maybe they tried to talk to people on the street. So maybe they could be doing a better job.
Yeah.
But in any case.
Yeah, but there's always going to be that trade-off. Like either you are like that group, or the pairs where they just stand there and hope that people will come and talk to them, or you're the charity that's constantly yelling at people, like harassing them.
Right.
There's two ends to the spectrum.
Yeah. But I think there's some threshold beyond which you should not cross. There's a line of saying you can't start being an asshole to people, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that's cool. Okay, that's interesting. All right, I pulled this quote. I don't know if you remember it. It's it's Harvey and Rachel talking to each other.
Yeah.
And Harvey says, when their enemies were at the gate, the Romans would suspend democracy and appoint one man to protect the city. It wasn't considered an honor. It was considered public service. And then Rachel says, and the last man they asked to protect the republic was named Caesar. He never gave up that power. And then Harvey says, well, I guess you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. What do you think? What are your thoughts?
It's a great quote. It's just not much you can say about it. It's just a great quote.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about the Romans suspending So Romans would have like a system of democracy, but I guess at a certain point they would do something like declare martial law, and then at that point, like, there's no democracy. People don't get a chance to have a say. It's just one man with executive power.
Emperor, yeah.
An emperor doing whatever they want. And supposedly, like, they need to give up that power when the time comes. But it's not dependent on one person. What do you think about that?
I think it makes total sense. Like, if you, like, accept, like, the power of being an emperor and you genuinely do good for your people, but then you start clinging to the power and you don't want to let it go, eventually when they're like, this is the time you need to step off the throne because we need a new one, and you're like, no, because this is my place now, then the bad side of you starts to show.
Sure.
Because even relates back to the Dark Knight, because when, Harvey became Two-Face, that's when his bad side started to show, and he started flipping coins to determine whether people would live or die.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's also the line you don't cross. There's a lot of these lines, and...
Right, as a person, as an individual, as a person who's been granted this supreme power, it's your responsibility to know when to give it up and not to get power hungry.
Yeah,
right?
Because then when you become power hungry, that's more likely to influence you to make bad decisions, and that in turn will make, like, everyone hate you, and you'll essentially become quote unquote the villain.
Right.
Of your location.
Yeah, but okay, so yeah, I get that idea from the perspective of, like, an individual. But what about from the perspective of the society? Like, they're originally a democracy. In what cases should people decide to relinquish their power to one person?
I guess, I don't know. I don't feel like that should ever be the case. But I guess in, like, total disaster, because the most important part of getting through like a challenge with the society is you don't just have one person do everything for you, because then everyone is just kind of, like, put in the dark, per se. And that one person is just deciding everything for everyone, even though everyone might not like it.
Do you know why? Why do you think a democracy would want to even do that? Why, when the enemies are at the gate, why give all this power to one person? Why not just keep being a democracy?
Because if they had a lot of people in government, maybe this is like this is a different way of looking at it. But when the people come through the gate, then they're gonna immediately want to go to the people in charge.
And it's harder to find the people in charge if it's a democracy. Yeah,
or no, it'd be easier because there's a lot of people. There's more people. There's more than one person in the.
Oh, you're saying that's why the democracy gives all of its power to one man
when the enemies are at the gate.
Because then it's harder to find one person.
No, like, I don't know. It's just, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, no, I mean, I think it's because, like, imagine you're in a room and you have to make a big decision and it's just you in a room. Let's say you have to decide what to wear tomorrow. Okay, and it's just you. How quickly do you make that decision?
Within 20 seconds?
Yeah. Let's say you invited all of your friends. Let's say you invited 3 friends into your room, and now you have to decide what, as a group, what are you going to wear?
Harder.
Going to be longer, right? Now the whole country has to vote to decide.
Oh, okay, I get that.
So the more people, the larger the group, the more people you start involving into some decision-making process, typically the longer it takes, the slower it is.
Yeah, that also goes back to, like, the enemies at the gate thing. Like, if they have people arguing about what decision to take or, like, what action to take against the enemy, then, like, the enemy has more time to think about what they're doing and then move in.
Right.
And then if it's just one person deciding, then they think about it, they do it.
Right.
And that's it.
Exactly. I think that's the appeal for democracy, to suspend their democracy and move to like a one-person ruler because of the speed of decision making. I think that's the appeal, but there's danger there, right? Because if that person stops being a hero, becomes a villain, and clings to power, then there's no more democracy, right?
Everything just goes down.
Yeah, I think it also appeals to, or it's the case more, you can apply this thing more broadly outside of just politics, like companies or businesses, like typically, like the bigger the company, the slower their decision-making process.
Yeah, like Google, I bet, has a very slow decision-making process.
Relative to some little, like, two-person company, yeah. Yeah. What was I going to say? Oh, I guess in the United States, for example, for the military, right, you don't have people voting on every strategic decision the military is going to make, right? You appoint, there's a general, there's one person really who's ultimately in charge. I guess the president is the commander in chief, right? And they're ultimately in charge of it. And so they can make decisions quickly. In general, that's like how how the United States works, right? Is that we don't have direct democracy where 350 million Americans are voting on every single policy issue. It's representative democracy where people vote representatives, and then they make the decisions. And I think there's a similar rationale for that too.
Yeah, I think so too.
So one thing that was happening during The Dark Knight is, I think it was towards the middle of the movie, it's kind of interesting because Batman's almost like public approval rating was fluctuating pretty wildly throughout the movie. In some parts, it seemed like people really loved him and they saw him as a hero, saving them from criminals and crime and danger.
And the Joker.
Right. In other times, they viewed him super negatively. Like, I think there was a scene in the movie where they really wanted him to be locked up, right? Because
the Joker, during that press conference with Harvey, right?
Right. Because the Joker made this threat that he was going to kill more and more people so long as Batman did not reveal who his identity was. So I guess one question there is, should Batman have revealed his identity to prevent more deaths?
This is another thing of like, does the end justify the means? Because like if he did reveal his face, what would be the outcome? Like individuals would, stop being killed, but then he's a much more easy target.
Right.
Because there was times in the movie where the Joker was like right next to Bruce and he had no idea who he was. And so he would have been a much easier target to get if he had not revealed himself. But then if he hadn't revealed himself, then people would keep dying, and the public opinion would instantly just get more and more negative, and he'd be more and more hated, possibly leading going back to how he's a vigilante, and he's technically illegal.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the cops would just come up to him and say, "You're letting more and more people die. We're gonna have to arrest you."
Right.
For all the bad things you're doing. So once again, it's that concept of the trade-off. Like, there's going to be consequences either way.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's the right way to think about it. It's like a cost-benefit analysis.
Yeah.
Like there's certain costs to revealing yourself, right? The costs are that, you're a much more easy target. Now the Joker, or everyone really, all the criminals can come get you and kill you. And if that happens, then if you think that you're a force for good and you're keeping them in check, then in the long run, they're going to cause a lot more damage to the city and to its people versus you having stayed as Batman, not reveal your identity, and just hunt them down,
Yeah, and also if he had died, because he'd be an easy target, if he had died, then the city's best hero, quote unquote, would be dead, and then they would just cause a rampage to the city. Right.
But there's clearly costs and benefits to each of those decisions, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, do you think so? Ultimately, Batman does not. It seems like he's about to during that press conference, but ultimately Harvey goes in, Batman doesn't. And do you think he made the right decision?
Well,
do you think he evaluated that cost-benefit trade-off pretty well?
I don't think he anticipated what would be the eventual outcome, because he knew that the Joker would like try and go kill him. But he also knew that, you know, he could come in and like stop him. But then he didn't know like what the Joker eventually had in mind, which was putting Harvey and Rachel both in the oil can filled rooms, and then eventually killing one of them and turning Harvey into Two-Face, which then leads to Batman having to kill Harvey to stop him.
Sure.
So,
but I think that when you're making any type of decision, you only have the information you have available to you in that moment, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of the stuff you're talking about, it happened in the future. So I think that's not the right way to make decisions, because that's like hindsight bias.
Yeah, but
right? You only know what you know in the moment, and that's how you judge the quality of a decision.
Yeah, in the moment, I think he should have stayed with it, because, you know, he's a very confident
Meaning
guy.
don't reveal your identity.
Yeah, don't
So
reveal.
you made the right decision, you think?
In the moment, yeah, because, you know, all he had in the moment was the information he had.
Right.
And he's a very confident guy, so I feel like he knew what he was doing, and he knew how he wanted to get like a good outcome of this, so that the end would justify the mean.
So you think, okay, he made the right decision in the moment, but you think if he knew what would ultimately transpire at the end of the movie, he made the wrong decision. You think he should have revealed himself?
Yeah, because at the end of the movie, him and the commissioner like agreed to like have the police chase him down, because he was the one that murdered all of those people, even though it was actually Harvey. And that's just like terrible, because, you know, he gets arrested, and then the city doesn't have Batman anymore.
Well, we don't know that happens.
Well, like theoretically. And then Harvey's like entire like half of his life is just a lie. And then they're just covering up just to keep the hope of the city in check.
Right. I guess it's tough to know, right? Because we're talking about hypotheticals, and we don't know the counterfactual. The counterfactual means we know the facts of what actually happened in the movie, right, after that decision was made. But we don't know the counterfactual, which means if he made the other decision and decided to turn himself in, how would the story have transpired?
Yeah,
you know,
it's a good question.
And it could have been a lot worse, right? Like maybe the Joker would stop killing these more and more people, but maybe the same things would have happened. Maybe it would have happened even worse, and now the whole city knows who Batman is. So if the story happened in the same way that it happened when he didn't choose to reveal his identity, it would have been worse at the end, because Batman could not have been this scapegoat at the end, right? Because at the end, he's serving a useful function, which is being a scapegoat. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah, it's a tough question. Ultimately, I think he made the right decision.
Yeah.
Okay, here's another question. So, similar to how the Joker at first is threatening to kill more people if Batman doesn't reveal his identity, at one point, I think later on in the movie, the Joker threatens to blow up a hospital unless this guy, Coleman Reese, who is this accountant who works for Bruce Wayne's company, who identifies that Batman is Bruce Wayne. So Joker threatens to blow up a hospital unless this guy is killed, because Joker ends up being like, oh, I actually don't want people to know who Batman is, right? Eventually. Yeah. So the question there is, should society give in to that demand? If the Joker says, Coleman Reese, this guy, should be killed, otherwise I'm going to blow up a hospital, should society kill Coleman Reese so that the Joker doesn't blow up a hospital?
Well, you know, the Joker said he's a man of his word many times throughout the movie. So, you know, he knows, we know that he wouldn't lie and still blow up the hospital either way. So if he was killed, then the hospital's safe and everyone's fine. But so that's that option. But, you know, he wasn't killed, and he ended up blowing up the hospital.
Right.
And then he had that long talk with Harvey when he was in the hospital, because he was going to blow it up. And that was a pretty influential talk because the Joker nearly died. Because, Harvey flipped a coin and it landed on, was it heads? So that he wouldn't...
Right. He didn't kill Joker.
Yeah.
Right.
So there was that. But it depends... Also, it depends... This God, Gotham City knows how powerful the Joker is. So they know that when... He's a man of his word. So when he says he's going to do something, if something doesn't happen, he means it. So it depends on how big the threat is. Because if he says, I'm going to kill this one guy that doesn't even matter, versus I'm going to blow up an entire hospital, potentially murdering hundreds of people, then that's a very big difference. Because, in this situation, they can't afford to lose so many people versus one guy.
So you really think that you can trust the Joker based on what he's saying?
He's proven throughout the movie, many times that he's a man of his word.
Okay, so in this example, given what we know about the Joker and the storyline in this movie, you think we should have given in to his demands and killed this guy?
Yeah.
Okay. What about more generally, just in the world, in the real world, should we give in to terrorists' demands?
No.
Why not?
Because they're just terrorists and they just want to scare people. And they just want to scare people into thinking something terrible is just going to happen if we don't do this thing.
Right.
And then 99%, not 99% of the time, but sometimes it doesn't even happen.
Right. Well, let's say there is a legitimate threat. They have a legitimate threat against something. And they say, we will do this unless you do X. Should we give in?
I don't know. It's a very tough question. Also, once again, it just depends on what the X is.
Right. Okay, so you think it's context dependent. There are some countries whose policy
there's
is...
some context dependent.
Yeah. I think there are some... I forget exactly which ones, but there are some countries in the world that have an explicit policy of never negotiating with terrorists. And there's many reasons for... I believe that is the case. I'm not 100% sure. I believe Israel is. But I think one reason off the top of my head that would be legitimate is, first of all, you don't ever know if what they're going to say is actually true, right?
Yeah.
But if you start giving in to terrorist demands, and if someone says, we're holding this building hostage, we're going to blow it up unless you give us $10 billion, and then you do that, you're incentivizing that behavior in the future.
So that they can just realize they can do it again.
Right, yeah. They can do it again, or other groups in the future can do it again. Or do something similar, right? Because they've seen, terrorist group X just got $10 billion for threatening to blow up some building. Maybe we can do something like that. This is a great way to make money, Because if you start rewarding people for their behavior in the future, it's going to happen more often. So you're basically incentivizing that type of stuff to happen. And so some countries have a policy of we don't do this. We're explicitly never negotiating with terrorists. We're never giving into their demands. And so in theory, that should lower this type of behavior in the first place. Because if terrorists know they're not going to get any money or whatever they want for doing these types of things, then they might not even do it in the first place, right? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think that's pretty smart.
But then, there's also that trade-off again, because in the Joker's case, we know that he actually will do it. And he's not just threatening in order to incentivize them to give him or kill someone, whoever he wants. I
guess some of these countries' perspective is, even if the threat is legitimate, right? Let's say we know this would never happen in the real world, but let's say, it's 100% certain that he is saying the truth and he is going to blow up this hospital unless we pay him, $10 billion. In the moment, in just that situation, if you just freeze time, you could say, yeah, let's just pay him the money because obviously we don't want this horrible thing to happen. But if you take a longer perspective, you have a longer time horizon, let's say over the next 20 years, is this a good decision right now? You could say no, because if we make this decision and we pay this terrorist this money, over the next 20 years, now this information is out in the world, and people know that if they make these threats, they can make money from us. Yeah. Do you see what I mean? So there's it depends on what your time horizon is, I think. If you just freeze time and you look at this one individual moment, maybe it's a good idea just to give them money. But over longer time, you're rewarding this behavior, so there's going to be more of it.
And yeah, once again, does the ends justify the means?
Right. How are we doing on time? Do you know what are we at?
Not exactly sure, but I think we should wrap it up.
Should we wrap it up?
Yeah.
Should we do one last one? One last question, or we should wrap it up, you think?
What do you want to do?
Let's do the last one, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I think it was towards the end of the movie. There's the Joker. So there are 3 fairies that go out into the water.
I thought it was 2.
Maybe it was 2. It doesn't really matter. Let's say it's 2. Okay, and they're both rigged to blow up. But the other fairy, each fairy has the other fairy's detonator. So they have this device that if they turn the key, the other fairy is going to blow up, right? And likewise for the other fairy. Mm-hmm. If they turn their key, your boat's going to blow up.
I remember that. And
the Joker says, it's like 8 p.m. or something, let's say. And at midnight, the Joker says, if both boats are not blown up, I will blow them both up. Right? So, now all of these people on those boats have to make this decision. What do you think they should do?
Well, one boat was filled with the civilians.
Right.
Trying to get away. And then one boat was filled with the prisoners.
Right.
Because the police were worried that the Joker was going to try and release them.
Do you think that's a significant part of your ethical calculus?
Ethically, yeah.
You think that's significant?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the civilians have already, they haven't done anything wrong. They're just ordinary people. But then the prisoners are, if you knew nothing else about the situation.
Right.
Then the prisoners are just, they're not great people. Because they've already chosen to murder and steal and do whatever else that they've done to get their time in prison.
Okay.
But that's obviously just the first way you look at it.
Mm-hmm.
But then, when you look at something that the biggest, baddest prisoner did, when he was given the detonator by one of the police chiefs or whatever, he threw it out the window. So it was impossible for them to win now.
Mm-hmm.
So he knew that they weren't going to survive. And that it was just an amazing thing that he did.
Mm-hmm.
Because he understood that the people in the other boat were civilians, and and these guys are prisoners.
Mm-hmm.
And why do they need to die?
Right.
But they also, on the civilians' boat, they were having this conversation as well. But then they were also like, do we need to blow these guys up? Why don't we just both live? Because, everyone deserves a second chance.
Right.
And then so neither of them end up blowing each other up.
Right.
And then so the Joker is going to blow them up.
Mm-hmm.
But then Batman, comes and stops him.
Sure. Okay. I know the story.
Yeah.
But let's say it's 8 p.m. on that boat and you've just learned all this information. And let's actually you've just learned all this information. It's 8 p.m. You have 4 hours to make this decision. You're on one of the boats. What do you think is the ethically correct thing?
What boat am I on?
Let's actually make it even simpler. I don't know if that makes it simpler. Let's say there's no prisoners or anything like that. It's just both boats are filled with civilians and you're on one of the boats. What do you do?
Don't blow it up.
You don't blow it up. Why?
Because you have to... The other people on the boat, the people on the other boat, are going to realize, obviously, that you're not blowing them up. And then, so from that, they realize these people are good people because they don't want to...
Okay, here's another... Okay, so an important point to the story is that there's no communication between the boats. So there's no way to know for sure that they're not going to blow you up.
There's only one form of communication, which is the fact that they are not dead. If you are on a boat and you are currently not dead after receiving this information, you realize that the people have not blown you up yet.
But it's the first minute. What do you do? They could blow you up the next minute. They're talking about it right now. What do you do?
You also have a discussion, but honestly, I would think you have to trust that the people on the other boat are also good people.
Yeah.
And they have they also have good hope
Yeah.
to believe and fight against terrorism.
Okay.
But so I would personally not use the detonator.
Okay, but let's say the information is out there that you both, if none of you blow each other up, both boats will blow up in 4 hours. So if you don't detonate the other boat, everyone's gonna die.
Well, I personally think that's like, this may sound like very, very not smart.
Yeah.
But like, personally, in terms of like the terrorist aspect, I think it's better to have both of them blow up than just one, because having one blow up, like, these civilians are all equal to each other. Like, no one is better than one another.
Okay.
Than one other person. So if one of them decides, yeah, we're gonna blow this other boat up so that we can survive, that just represents like kind of like essentially secession from their own people. And if none of the boats blow up, that's like a big slap in the face to terrorism, because what the Joker wants is to get these people to rally up against each other. But if none of them do that, then he hasn't achieved what his end goal is.
Brilliant. All right, should we wrap?
We should wrap.
Let's wrap.
So, thank you for listening to this episode. This has been episode 6, and we'd like to thank Dan again for coming on to this podcast for the second time. Thank you to Anchor for sponsoring this podcast again. Make sure to send me a voice message if you want to end up on the podcast. Listen to my music, and anything else you'd like to say?
That's it. We're out. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. And I hope the next decade and next year is good for you and good for everyone. Thank you for listening to this, and goodbye.
Peace.